Hello everyone, welcome to Musicians Edition. Thank you for turning into another video. I am Evan here going into a guitar lesson on reading guitar notes. And so there's a couple different ways we'll look at today. We're going to be talking about starting to read tabs as well as the traditional sheet music that you can read for guitar as well too. So you might be interested in reading one versus the other. I will be covering both in this channel just so you can practice doing both of those things, because as you do look up songs online, you might run into sheets, you might run into tabs, you might just run into chord charts as well too, which is something else I'll cover in a future video. But regardless of whatever it is, we'll talk about those. Tabs is typically the easiest for a beginner because it's really friendly and specific to the guitar. Sheets is what used for all different kinds of instruments, so it is especially difficult if you're not familiar with sheet music. I'll give you the basics on that today, and then we'll cover more and more as we go through playing on the different strings of the guitar, which we will do in future videos. So let's start off with a comparison. Let's have you look at what we're talking about here. So you can see this example here where we're going to have a sheet with the tab below it. This is something you might come across as you do look up sheets, because the tab is something that's really good to help guide this. And what's good about having both of these together is sheets versus tabs both have their strengths and weaknesses. When you put them together, you can really have both strengths working together, which is definitely the ideal way to be able to do it. A lot of the times you will just come across one or the other though, so knowing how to do each of them is something you might find helpful. Honestly, a lot of guitar players don't know how to read sheets, and you can get by with tabs, but we'll just discuss some of the weaknesses with just following tabs today. But here's what you might come across. You can see up top we have that sheet. We have this weird kind of shape with a set of lines with some spaces in between those. On the bottom you can see just tab written out, and you just have 6 lines, which covers the 6 strings of the guitar, and you have numbers going across there that's going to represent what fret you're pressing your finger on. And so you can see why the tab is so much friendlier and specific to guitar, which makes it easier for the guitar players, because you just have those 6 strings. So you look at it, you know exactly what string you need to play. You look at the number, you know exactly what you need to do with that string, versus looking at that sheet. If you're not familiar with sheet music, you probably have no idea what's going on there, what you're looking at. You just see E, F, G written above it, but how do you know that's E, F, G? Some of that is stuff we'll cover today, but really it's going to take some work over time, because it's, the sheet is most specific to piano in my opinion, and easiest to play on the piano, but for guitar it's not that friendly. But we'll talk about the perks of it today, and we'll see which way you're going to sway. Okay, so that was an example of just playing one string. Here's another example showing you playing multiple strings as well too. Again, you can see the sheet on top, you can see the tab below it as well too, and see what it looks like differences moving between different strings on the guitar. It's more obvious when you're going to move between strings when you're looking at the tabs, because again, very specific. You can just see those notes written exactly on those strings that you're going to be playing, with the frets that you're going to be playing, either open or fretted on a certain number. The sheet up top, harder to find what notes you're going to be playing. First of all, you have to know, looking at that sheet, what note is that, and then you have to figure out, looking at the guitar, where is that note on my guitar? On the tab, you don't even have to pay attention to what notes you're playing. It's just telling you exactly where to play on the guitar, which is very easy for beginners to follow. So let's go ahead and start with tabs. So as I mentioned, there are 6 lines on the tab representing each of the 6 strings on our guitar. The bottom line is going to be the thickest string, that low E, and then we work up to A, D, G, B, and E, and that is what makes up our 6 lines of the tabs. So in this example here, you can see we're doing a lot of movement between the different tabs here, and you just read this strictly left to right. So the first note I would play on this tab would be 7th fret of the D string, and then I'm going to go 5th fret of the G string, 5th fret of the B, 5th fret of the high E, and then you can see there's 2 notes that are aligned vertically, so we're going to play both of those at the same time. That 7th fret of the high E as well as the 6th fret of the D string, and again we just keep moving across like that. So just reading left to right, and it's just presented in a nice way so you know exactly what to play, where to put those fingers. So that's the great thing about tabs. The not so great thing about tabs is I don't know the timing between these notes. Unless I'm really familiar with the song and I know how that melody is going to sound, I don't know how long to play these notes and when to move on to the next one, really, because it's not telling me that. And so some tabs will be written more creatively to help communicate that, having bigger gaps between some of the numbers, so that's your signal to play it for a little bit longer. But really, I don't know the pacing of any of this. I can listen to the song, and that's a way that you could decide you want to learn, and that's totally fine to do, especially if you're just getting started. Listen to the song, you can play those notes out, have that song in your head, and you can hear, okay, this is how long the first note, the second note, third note are going to go on, and just so on and so on. Match it up with the song. And that's pretty easy to do. But it means you have to be reliant on knowing what that song sounds like and following along to it. You can't just look at a tab and independently be able to play it exactly how it should be played, because you don't know the timing of these notes. So that is where the sheet comes into play, and that's the weakness of the tab, but also the strength of the sheet. But definitely the biggest strength of this tab is super easily accessible, super specific to the guitar, easy to look at, and knowing exactly what notes, where to press your fingers, and what to play. So that's why tabs are really, really great for beginners. Okay, so let's go into the sheet. The tab, it's really, really quick to go into because it's very straightforward. The sheet, there's a lot of different aspects we're tying together. We're not nearly going to go into all of those in this video, just the very basics, and I'll be putting up more and more videos practicing playing on each individual string so you can get more familiar with recognizing where those notes are. I'll also be focusing on tabs as well too, so if you just have zero interest in the sheet, you don't have to worry about it because you can get by just doing tabs really. But let's talk about the sheet. It is a lot more going on here, but it is the best way to be able to accurately play a piece exactly how it's written and following it without having to play the song along with you while you're playing. Because it's going to be telling you what notes to play as well as how long to play those notes for, which is what that tab was missing. So let's look at the parts to sheet music. I'll put up some diagrams to go along here so you can see what I'm talking about as well too. Sheet music is written on what's called a staff, and instead of 6 lines like there was in a tab, there is 5 lines. And then we also write notes on the spaces in between those lines. So we have 5 lines that makes up the staff as well as those 4 note spaces in between. And that's just what the general staff is. Notes can be anywhere, any of those 5 lines, any of those spaces, as well as written above the staff or below the staff, which is something I'll help you get the hang of. So let's just start off with just notes written on the staff. So there's acronyms to help you remember what each of the line is, what each of the space is, and what note that corresponds to. And we use these going from the bottom up. And so going from the bottom up, we're going to look at every guitarist begins doing fine, or every good boy deserves fudge. Every good boy deserves fudge is usually the one used for different kinds of instruments, but specifically to the guitar, we can use every guitarist begins doing fine. And that's again going from the bottom up, so that's E, G, B, D, F. Meaning if we read a note that's written on the bottom line, we would play an E. The line above it, we would play a G, B, and so on and so on. And then if there's a note written on a space, we would use face. No acronym needed, just face. And again, that's going from the bottom up to fill out those 4 spaces. So if you read a note that's on the first space between the first and second lines from the bottom, we would play an F. Written higher up on the space above, play an A, then a C, then an E. And that does cover a good amount of notes on the guitar, but there's a lot of notes on the guitar, and you can just look at these and say, okay, there's only 4 spaces and 5 lines, so what, there's only 9 notes that I can possibly play? No, we can also play sharps and flats. The notes by themselves only correspond to the natural position of them, which is just A through G, but we can also put a sharp or a flat next to any of those, and we would play the sharp or flat version of it. And we can also add what's called ledger lines above or below the staff to really fill out all the notes on the guitar. And so here's what that would look like, all the notes on the guitar written out. And so you can see here's the tab version of it, starting all the way down at playing the open low E string, and you can see the note that it corresponds to above. It would actually be 3 ledger lines below, and the space even below that third one would be the very low E that you would play. And so there's really no acronym to help you count down there. That is something you're just going to have to get familiar with. And if you are starting as a beginner, just practice doing it on the staff. Nothing too creative way below or way above it. Just get comfortable with the staff, and then you can start going bit by bit down, bit by bit up to get more comfortable with those. But you can see this is all the notes we could possibly play pretty much on the guitar, just going up to that 10th fret on the highest string. We do play the lowest note here. You could technically go higher and higher and go past the 12th fret, and that would just go, skyrocket way above the staff here. You could choose to play that if you'd like to. And one other thing to cover is you can see that little shape on the left side that is called the treble clef. And so different instruments play on different clefs. There's a bass clef that you might see in piano, or if you are playing a bass guitar. This is just the treble clef, which is just going to be the only one we have to worry about on guitar. Okay, so that covers the staff. That's just one part of this. There's some more we got to go into. Okay, so sheet music will have groups of notes separated by bar lines, and you'll likely see these on tabs as well too. But it doesn't matter quite as much on tabs. It's more specific to sheet music, because on sheet music we're worried a lot more about the timing and the lengths we're going to be playing a note for. And so bar lines and measures help us with that. So you might have heard bar in the past, related to music. That's just a section of the music that's split up and just copy pasted across the music. Each of these bars has a set amount of beats that's fitting in it, and you can count those beats out as you're playing a song. Clap your hands, you have a steady beat that the song is going to follow. Tap your foot, same thing as well too. You could count along with it as well too. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you could have a song written in threes, twos, sixes, really any number that a song could be counting in. The most common one is going to be in fours, though, that you can count along to. So you can start to get the hang of hearing that steady beat, that steady rhythm throughout a song. Play a song and just practice clapping, tapping your foot to it, counting it out, and that's just what the steady beat of the song is. And you have bar lines throughout a sheet or throughout a tab that has those evenly split up. And you'll have what's called a time signature at the beginning of a piece. And we're not going to worry too much about this and the different kinds of time signatures. Let's just talk about 4/4, which is the most common time signature. And what that's telling you is there's a 4 stacked on top of another 4 at the beginning of the piece. And so there is 4 beats within each bar or measure or in between each of the bar lines. You can count out 4 beats, which means you can count 1, 2, 3, 4. At different tempos, it could be a lot faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. It could be a lot slower, whatever it is for that specific song. And so that's starting to get into the timing aspect here. One other part we do have to cover along with that too is the different kinds of notes you could see placed on the sheet, which is again something that makes this a bit more difficult than the tabs, because you don't worry about this on the tabs. But this is the good part about sheets, in that you do learn and practice playing with specific timings. There is a whole note, which is just an open circle. There's a half note, which is an open circle with a stem on it. And then a quarter note, which is a closed circle with a stem on it. And there are other ones, 8th and 16th notes, but if we're beginners, we're not going to worry about those yet. Let's just practice with whole, half, and quarter notes here. And so what each of these means is the whole note is the one that is played for the longest amount of time. And it's not a set amount of seconds or anything like that. It's different songs have different tempos. Some songs are slower than others. Some songs are faster than others. That's not such a foreign concept, I assume. And so the timing is specific to each song and how much time is in between each beats. So a whole note counts out 4 beats. You strum and you count 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's how long that note is held for before you let go and move on to the next one. And then there's a half note, which is 2 beats. So you strum and you hold for 1, 2. And then quarter note is just that 1 beat that you just strum and hold for 1. And by the time you get to 2, you're lifting off and ready to move on to something else if there's another note coming up right after. So I apologize. It is a lot to go into at once. Beginner guitar players, intermediate, even advanced, a lot of guitar players don't know music theory, don't know how to read sheets, and they still get by. Because you can improv, you can hear a song and just practice playing along to it. Reading a tab, having the song in the background to help you get the timing of it, is what you can do to get by as a guitar player. And if you're a beginner, I really encourage you to just stick to tabs for now. I'll put up some videos that do help break down sheet music and make it a bit more understandable in the future. For the time being, if you're just getting started, if you're not familiar with sheet music, don't worry about it yet. Just do tabs and you'll be fine. But let's go ahead and look at an example and how we could approach and play a song with both the sheet and tabs together. So let's look at a basic one. This is going to be Mary Had a Little Lamb. This is the tab and sheet music put together. We got the sheet up top, we got the tab below it. The tab, again, it's straightforward. It'll help guide us as we have the sheet along here too. And then, we have both of the strengths paired together here. We can use the sheet music to maybe help us with the timing if we need it. Obviously, this is a very familiar song everyone knows, so you might not need that, but with other songs that you're not as familiar with, it is something that will help you understand the timing for. Even if you don't pay attention to where those notes are placed, you can just look at whole, quarter, or half, and use that to practice counting it out with the beats of the song. So let's just play this out, just focusing on the tab, as most of the beginners will be doing as they approach songs. You can see we're only playing on the top 3 strings, which is the high E, and then we're going to be playing the G and the B strings as well too. So if you're not familiar with the string names, starting with the thickest one, and my acronym is just elephants and donkeys got big ears. And so the ones we're playing is the high E, the B, and the G. You can see we're just playing up to either 0, which is played openly. There's a couple 1 frets, there's a couple 2 frets, and then 3 frets. So we're not going to be going past the 3rd fret on here, which is just 1, 2, 3. So it's a pretty easy piece to be able to play. So starting off, if we look at the tab, we are going to be playing the 2nd string from the top, which is going to be that E, A, D, G, B, E, that B string. So I'm going to play 3rd fret B string, and then I'm going to play open E string, 3rd fret B string again, then slide down to the 1 fret there, and that's that first measure there. I want to have my notes evenly spaced apart because I can look above at the sheet and see that it's 4 quarter notes that are evenly spaced. So I'm going to play 3, 0, 3, 1. Okay, so I'm playing those 2 different strings. I'm playing that B string and the E string there. So, Mary had a... There it is, okay? And then we can go on to the next one. This is all just going to be the same string, so this one's going to be easier. I'm playing it open, 1, 3. Okay, so all this together, we're going to say, Mary had a little lamb. Mary had a little lamb. Just like that. Okay, and then next is we're going to be playing that string that's a bit lower on the 2nd fret. That's going to be the G string. Find that 2nd fret on the G string there. And then we're going to go up a string and we're going to play open, and then the 1 fret on that same string. So 2, up a string, open, and then 1. Okay, so that's that right there. And I can look above at the sheet and I can see I have a quarter, and then a half note. So that last note I play on the 1 fret, I'm going to hold for a little bit longer. It should be twice as long as the ones before because it takes up 2 beats instead of 1. If you're familiar with the song, it's really easy to just know that and follow along with it. And then again, I'm going to play on this 4th measure what I just played on the 2nd one, same exact thing. B string, it's going to be open, 1, 3. So this whole first line I can play now. I'll go nice and slow. Just work on having even spaced notes, though, no matter how slow you are going to go. Here we go. There it is. Okay, and then we can look at the next line. Let's look at what's different about this one. So first 2 measures, exactly the same. Then that next one, we are just missing 1 note, and then we're playing the 3rd fret instead of the 1 like we did above it. And then that last measure is also different. So just these last 2 that are different, we can quickly go through the first 2 on this line. Same thing that we did before. 3rd, highest string open, back to 3rd, 1st fret, and then open, 1, 3. And then we're going down to the G string, played the 2nd fret like we did earlier. Holding that because it is a half note, you can look above to help you out with that. We're going to hold that for 2 beats. And then we're going to go up a string and to the 3rd fret. And then we finish looking at this last one, just 2 strings open. We'll play the higher string here, which is going to be B, and then G. And we'll just finish on that G, and we can hold it out as however long we want to. So the second line by itself, let's go nice and slow through it. This is what it would sound like. And that's that. So that's good practice with being able to follow along to a tab. Okay, if we want to look more at the sheet music side of this, we could identify these notes. We could use E, G, B, D, F. Every guitarist begins doing fine. We could use face to help figure these things out. But the issue with that is you can sure go through and identify this. Look at that first note. You can say every guitarist begins doing, that first one's a D, but if you're not familiar with the strings on here, you might not know where to find that D that they're trying to tell you to play. So that's what can be difficult. And then, you could look at the next note and say, okay, that's on a space, F-A-C-E, that's going to be an E. So I'm going to play a D and then an E. But looking at your guitar, you might not know which D and E you're supposed to play because there's multiple on the guitar. So that's something that could be difficult. If you are familiar with the sheet, if you are familiar with the layout of the notes on the guitar, then that's something you might be more comfortable doing. But really, beginners, stick with tabs. If there's something with a tab and a sheet there, you can kind of use both of those two together to help with the timing. Otherwise, just use the tab and follow along with songs for the time being. I will put up videos that are going to go into sheet music that will break down just each individual string by itself and knowing the common notes played on each of those strings. So you can look at the sheet and just be more familiar with it from those lessons and know which note you're going to be playing. But for the time being, if you are a beginner, stick with tabs. It's easy, it's accessible, specifically made for the guitar. It's a great thing that's going to really help you learn a lot of songs because there's a lot of websites out there that make a lot of different tabs. One that I use specifically is Ultimate Guitar Tabs, and it has just thousands of songs, a bunch of different tabs out there that you can start to learn your favorite riffs to. So thank you all for tuning into this lesson on guitar, starting to read sheet music, starting to read tabs, most specifically to the tabs. Do look out for future videos that will go into these a bit more. I'll put up videos on reading more complex tabs, being able to play, chords following along with tabs. I'll also be putting up a video going over the chord chart, so you can just look at those and be able to follow those types of tabs as well too. And then I will be going more into sheet music and specifically focusing on some of the individual strings and then putting those strings together so you can read the sheets, or just being better with being able to play along different strings and going in between the different strings. All great skills to have as a guitar player. Have fun playing, and see you next time.